Hello, welcome back to Mayday Flight Tutoring and my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to do yet another video about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. Well, no, not really. Well, it's kind of interesting. You know, many people who when they're doing their flight test or preparing for their flight test, of course they do the pre-flight with the instructors on the ground portion. One of the subjects that I find catches people a lot is the Pitot-Static System and blockages and how that affects readings on the instruments. So I thought I'd do a video about that today from my somewhat dreary flat in Berlin today. It looks like a little bit of a thunderstorm day. I was going to go to the lake and do some swimming, but I decided instead to stay inside and work on this. I think this is like the 5th video I've done. I've had like audio problems. My phone is full, so I can't use my phone because I put Flight Plan Go on here because I think I know where I'm going to be teaching next in a month, and so I wanted to check the airspace out there. So now my phone doesn't have enough space to do videos on, and I'm too cheap to buy a SIM card or SD card, I mean. So I'm using my laptop, and I'm trying for the first time using the live streaming function on YouTube. And I don't think the video quality is quite the same. I know it's not the same. But it's kind of convenient. It uploads directly to YouTube, and it's just a chat anyways. It's not like I have to be in high definition. Actually, the higher definition I'm in, the worse I look anyway. That's a product of aging. Anyhow, as per usual, I made some notes to go along with this chat, which I will post as JPEG or GIF or whatever the heck in various comments. So you can use that to follow along or to use. Like I said, the topic today is about blockages in the Pitot-Static system and how that affects the instrument readings. And without further ado, let's get started. So you can see on the top here, I have a little diagram of the Pitot-Static system. Okay, so there's your your airspeed indicator, the altimeter, and the vertical speed indicator. And these are the lines, the tubes that go to, this tube goes from the airspeed indicator to the pitot probe. And here's the static port, which feeds all 3 instruments, the airspeed indicator, the altimeter, and the vertical speed indicator. Okay, so this little illustration, along with some logic, and you only need memorize one thing, and you already know that. You don't have to memorize all this stuff. If you read the flight training manual or read the ground up, it seems complicated the way it's described, but it's actually really super simple. If you know one thing, is that as you increase in altitude, the atmosphere becomes less dense. The air is less dense because the molecules are further apart as you go to the edge of the atmosphere. And as you descend, air is denser. So the molecules are closer together and there's higher pressure. So lower pressure up high, higher pressure down low. If you remember that, then you can work out any pitot-static problem using logic alone without memorizing. Lord knows we memorize so many things in aviation that it's nice to be able to just use logic. Yeah, so let's talk about the static blockage. Okay, so there's the little static port. And let's start with the altimeter. Okay, as you can see, the altimeter simply reads the static air coming in, which fills a bellows, and in lower pressure air, it will indicate a higher altitude, and in higher pressure air, it will indicate a lower altitude through a series of gears, okay? So that's the static air coming in through the static port on the side of the airplane, reaching all the way to the altimeter. So if you have a blockage on the static port, what's going to happen is you've got air blocked now between the altimeter and the static port hole. So that means that the air is at constant pressure no matter what your altitude is, all right? So if you go up high, it's still the same air pressure in that blocked tube. If you go down low, it's still the same air pressure in that blocked tube. So as you can imagine, the altimeter freezes, okay? That's a very simple symptom of a blockage in the static port, all right? Moving on to the vertical speed indicator. Well, that's a nifty instrument. The vertical speed indicator also takes air from the static port. But as you know, it indicates the rate of change of altitude, all right, in hundreds of feet per minute. So the needle goes up as you're increasing in altitude, depending on the rate of change, it'll be a higher or a lower amount, and conversely as you descend, okay? And how that works is that it does read the air from the static port, all right? But there's a little pinhole in the casing of the VSI, all right? So imagine like you're climbing and you're showing like say 200-300 feet per minute or maybe more. What's happening is as you climb, the atmosphere is getting thinner and thinner and thinner as you climb, and that thinner and thinner air comes into the static port, and it deflects the bellows of the vertical speed indicator in the climb rate. But then as you level off, now the atmosphere is constant as you fly through on the same level. Then the little drain, the little pinhole on the casing allows air to seep in. It takes about 6 or 8 seconds. And what will happen is that the air will equalize between the bellows and the casing of the VSI, and the needle will drop to 0. And as you descend, the air is getting thicker and thicker and thicker as you're descending, which then deflects the bellows in the opposite direction. As long as you keep descending, it'll show that indication. But then when you stop descending, say you level out or you land, then the pinhole in the vertical speed indicator casing will again leak in over 6 seconds or so, and then equalize the air in between the bellows and the casing, and then the VSI will read 0. All right. So imagine you've got a blockage in the static port. All right. So you've got constant pressure of air in this tube here, the ASI. Imagine what happens. Okay. No matter what altitude you're at, whether you're climbing or descending, the air in the static port is constant pressure. Yet that pinhole still operates. So after 6 or 8 seconds, as the air leaks into the pinhole into the vertical speed indicator, then the air between the static port system, which is at constant pressure because it's blocked, and the casing equalize, and the needle drops to 0. So therefore, when you have a blockage in the static port of the VSI, eventually after 6 or 8 seconds, the needle will go to 0, and it'll show neither a climb nor a descent. And that's how that works. Now let's talk about the airspeed indicator. Okay, so the airspeed indicator is the unique beast of the 3 beasts here. It takes air from the pitot probe through a tube into the airspeed indicator, compared to static air, which comes through the static system. Okay, so as you know, the principle of the airspeed indicator is that ram air coming through the pitot tube deflects the bellows. Depending on how fast you go through the atmosphere, it'll deflect it more, and your airspeed shows an increase. You slow down, the airspeed shows a decrease because there's less ram air coming in. All right. So imagine that you have a static blockage. Okay. So the air right here is trapped between the static port and the static side of the airspeed indicator. Yet everything on the pitot side is hunky-dory. All right. So that being the case, now you can use that logic. If you have a static blockage, as you increase in altitude, the static blockage is always the same pressure because the air is blocked in the static. But on the pitot end, even though there's ram air coming in, the air is less and less dense as you climb in altitude. So it's going to show a lower airspeed the higher you go. All right. And then conversely, the lower you go, the air gets thicker and thicker and thicker going into the pitot end compared to the blocked static end. Then it's going to show a decrease in, it's going to show an increase in airspeed because the air is thicker and thicker. So there's more pressure on the ASI input. So basically, as you go up, it shows a decrease in airspeed, and as you go down, it shows an increase in airspeed when you have a static blockage on the airspeed indicator. All right, so let's imagine now, let's talk about the probe for a second. All right, the probe actually has 2 holes, okay? It has the hole on the front end that allows the relative air as you're flying through the atmosphere to enter into the airspeed indicator. And there's also another little hole in the back that you may or may not know about. It's called a drain port. It's just a tiny little pinhole. You should check it when you're doing your pre-flight. It's very tiny. And what that does is it allows any moisture that's trapped into the pitot probe to evaporate through or to leak out. And it keeps the pitot probe clear of obstructions, of water obstructions, okay? Imagine if you had a blockage for whatever reason on the drain port. How do you think that would affect the airspeed indication? Well, logic would dictate that the air coming into the pitot is not changed by or it might be changed in a very micro amount by the blockage of the drain port, but generally all of the air that you're flying through is rushing into the pitot system and working fine. So your airspeed indication is going to be relatively unchanged, basically unchanged. Maybe if you had a digital readout, you'd see some small difference, but nothing that you would ever worry about. Okay, so conversely, imagine that the drain port is open, but a little bug crawls into the entrance of the pitot probe, or maybe it ices over, all right? So now you have no ram air coming in to the pitot probe, but yet you do have air leaking in, just a small amount of air, which will eventually equalize the pressure between the static system, which is outside atmosphere, and the pitot end, which now this becomes outside atmosphere because this is not seeing any relative wind. It's just a drain port at the back. So if you have a blockage in the drain port, I don't know, bug or, I mean, it's a pretty tiny port. It'd have to be a pretty tiny bug, like maybe one of those no-see-ums that gets stuck in there, or a little ice in the back. Then, I'm sorry, I'm getting messed up there. So the front of the pitot tube is blocked, but the drain port's open. It's going to equalize with the static port, right? Because it's acting like another static port. Okay, so imagine you have a blockage of both the front and the back of the pitot tube. So the ram air entrance and also the drain port are blocked. Maybe a bug crawled in and went up and got stuck in the tube here. Okay, so now you have trapped air in the tube, all right? But your static side's working great, okay? So this is that classic ASI operates as an altimeter scenario that people sort of memorize from the books. Basically, using logic, if the air pressure is constant on the pitot end of the airspeed indicator, as you increase in altitude, you'll have less dense air on the static side compared to the stuck air on the pitot side, all right? It's going to show a higher airspeed, all right? It's as if there's more pressure on the pitot side. And as you descend, then the static air is getting thicker and thicker, and when you compare the stuck air on the pitot side with the increasingly thick static air, it's going to show a decrease in airspeed. So it sort of acts like an altimeter, although it really isn't an altimeter. I don't really like that analogy too much. I just like the logic of like, imagining blocked air in comparison to air that isn't blocked, that changes density depending on your altitude. It's a very easy way to imagine the scenarios that can occur with blockages. Now, it's quite possible that you could have a complete blockage of your pitot tube and a blockage of the static port. Okay, so now you got trapped air here and trapped air here. Whatever indication you had on your airspeed indicator is just going to stay the same. It's frozen because the air is trapped on both sides. So that's a total blockage of the Pitot-Static system and how it relates to the airspeed indication. So there you go. Fairly straightforward, not too complicated. You only have to memorize the fact that the air is less dense in altitude and more dense at lower altitudes. And you can work out any pitot-static problem just with simple logic. There's a great website resource. It's called luizmontero.com, LUIZMONTERO.com. And they have a really cool Java-based Pitot-Static Simulator. So you can simulate blockages and change altitudes and airspeeds and see how the instruments react. So I'll put that in the comment section along with my chicken scratching notes, which, is not quite as bad as a doctor's writing, but it's pretty close. But I think all the information is there, and it's kind of handy when you're preparing for your flight test. So yeah, so that's it for today. I'd just like to make a little plug for my YouTube station here and for my Mayday flight tutoring page. I have a number of subscribers. I'm really happy about that. I know all of you. I would love to get some more subscribers, students who are interested in getting some help through my videos or through direct one-on-one contact through a system like this. online. It would be really great if you passed on, maybe shared my site, Mayday Flight Tutoring, with a friend, or maybe you remember if somebody mentions that they're struggling with something, you could give them my information. Be happy to help them out, or they could look at the videos. Eventually, pretty well everything I talk about will end up on videos anyway. I just like making the videos. Fills the time as I'm on vacation. And the good news for me, I'm enjoying Germany and Berlin. However, I am really keen to get back in the air, and I think I know where I'm going for my next flight instructor job. I'm very excited about that. I'm just working out the details now, but basically about a month to 5 weeks from now, I'll be set up and teaching. And so I'm hoping to make some videos from the air, actually, and sort of mix it up a little bit. Anyways, I hope you have a great day there in Canada or wherever you are, and always be safe. Do a proper walk around, pre-flight, and keep at the books, because you gotta love studying if you love aviation, because it's a very information-intensive subject. And as I like to say, it's not rocket science, but it's the closest thing to it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and take care.